After the Canadian men qualified for their first World Cup in 36 years, the attention quickly turned to who they would be facing in the group stage. Canada ended up in Group F with second-ranked Belgium, 12th-ranked Croatia, and 22nd-ranked Morocco. Many consider Canada to be a dark horse in this group. Joining me now on Soccer North, renowned soccer journalist and author, that would be Grant Wahl. Grant, come on, are we being overly optimistic here and thinking Canada can get to the round of 16? Be honest.
I'm being honest, and I don't think it is overly optimistic. On paper, it's going to be hard for Canada when you look at all the talent with Croatia, with Belgium, two semifinalists from the last Men's World Cup. Obviously, Croatia got to the final. And yet, those are both sort of viewed as older teams, and Canada is not. They're a young team, a very exciting young team with real quality talent, not just Alphonso Davies, not just Jonathan David, but several players now all over Europe. Kyle Larin had a terrific qualifying campaign, and I thought Canada was the story of the planet in World Cup qualifying, the best story in what they were able to do to win the CONCACAF 14-game tournament. So I don't think Canada is going to be fazed by playing these teams in the World Cup, and I think it's going to be a test of something I've always thought about the World Cup, which is that it is a young person's event. And if that actually is true, then Canada does have a chance to advance from this group.
Well, and you just touched on something there, because sometimes we can get lost in our own bubble. And Canada has been so great. And I always wonder, but are we the only ones saying that? Or is the outside world saying that too? How have the Canadians been perceived throughout that whole qualifying?
Well, anyone that's been paying attention, and I have, has seen how good Canada has been over 14 games during qualifying. This wasn't some fluke that they won the tournament in CONCACAF, that they played 4 games against the U.S. and Mexico, did not lose any of those games, and won 2 of them at home. So that's very impressive. Canada showed they can play different styles and get results. John Herdman, I think, is a very underrated coach. And I think we're going to have the world maybe at large starting to notice only when things happen on the field at the World Cup. And maybe Canada doesn't mind that. Maybe they'll be able to go into the tournament with very little pressure on them as a result.
Okay, so hold on a second, though. So Croatia, I mean, come on, they're old, right? Luka Modric, like, he's running out of steam, right? Belgium, Kevin De Bruyne's getting up there, too. Hey, no Romelu Lukaku now, right? Reactivating that hamstring injury. There's that optimism again, Grant. But how does Canada prepare for those two teams? How do they find a way to get some sort of result against them?
You know, I think it's partly about not fearing those teams in the World Cup. I don't think Croatia and Belgium are unbeatable. You know, I remember in the last World Cup, even though they went very far in the tournament, a team like Japan probably should have beaten Belgium in the last World Cup. It was a terrific elimination game that Belgium eventually won, but Canada, for me, is on par or slightly better than Japan. So I look at it in those terms. You know, don't be afraid of going toe-to-toe to these teams and these players. You know, obviously Luka Modric is a guy, yes, not a young man, but still playing extremely well. Players like Rakitic, fantastic. And you look at the talent on the Belgian team, and yes, they're going to be missing some players, but they're also going to have some phenomenal players like De Bruyne. So I want to be realistic, but I'm not writing Canada off in any way, shape, or form. I've seen them play extremely well too many times to do that.
Grant, we know the pomp and circumstance around the World Cup, and it's so easy to get lost in it, but we also know the other issues of Qatar, the nation where it's being held, and human rights issues. Now, when it comes to journalism, how important is it to have independent journalism covering an event like this in a place like that?
I think it's extremely important to have independent journalists. You know, at my site, grantwahl.com, I am my own boss. I sent myself to Qatar earlier this year, and knowing that I was going to be covering this World Cup and focusing on the soccer during the tournament, I wanted to do some stories from my site on migrant workers, on speaking to them myself. And I asked them, did the laws that were passed to protect migrant workers in Qatar in 2019, are those being followed on the ground? And the fact is, a bunch of them told me that several of those laws are not being followed on the ground. And so there has been some progress in the last decade in terms of laws that have been passed in Qatar, and even human rights groups have applauded those. But those human rights groups also point out that until enforcement on the ground of those laws is really taking place, you don't have full progress.
It's so important what you do. Keep doing it. Looking forward to your coverage as well in the World Cup. Grant, appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this content, don't miss anything that we're putting out on Soccer North. Be sure to download the CBC Gem app, head to the App Store, and hey, it's free.